Hi everyone, welcome to my review of GoldenEye from 1995, directed of course by Martin Campbell, and yes, the 17th Bond film in the franchise. So here we are back and we are hyped to talk about this very special film, in my opinion. And yes, of course, 6 year gap here, between License to Kill and GoldenEye. So I kind of wanted to maybe honour that, perhaps, kind of tie that in and kind of waiting an extra kind of week or so. So that's why there's been a bit of a gap, perhaps, between this and License to Kill. But yes, all the better for it. Actually, kind of let the Dalton films sink in and then kind of move on to the Brosnans. So yes, this film of course, and this will have spoilers. I'll be kind of getting in depth perhaps into this kind of discussion. So if you haven't seen this film, be warned, there will be spoilers kind of in this discussion here and kind of details. So if you haven't seen this, simply watch the film first. Maybe recommend that at least, and then we can come back and kind of talk about this in the comments. Perhaps you kind of watch this without getting different plot details, perhaps events kind of given away to you before you've seen it. So yes, with that said, wow, this film, and it's of course the first of many, and kind of a slight return as well, I feel, to different Bond elements, and really for me what makes Bond so special. And this film is definitely my most watched Bond film of all time. I will say that now. I've seen this so many times, more than 50 easily, in my lifetime. I think as a kid, this is definitely a film that I watched so much. And really, I'll say it now as well. At one point, when I was a kid, before I'd maybe seen a particular, Bond film or two, of course, or a few Bond films, kind of thing. There, this was definitely, my favourite. This was my favourite Bond film, and it's a very special film to me. It's a film that I really have great memories of seeing. Kind of just, for example, just the comedy of the film as well. Just laughing at different moments that may be very strange, and of course, now that I've grown up, of course, just laughing again at different unique moments in this, different kind of characters and stuff, and just having such a great time with this, and just loving the action, of course, and just this was definitely my Bond film that I've seen the most. So it's very special in that sense, and I think this is like many Bond films, kind of divisive, but I stand by this being one of the absolute greatest Bond films. That's my personal take on this as an overall film, and this is right up there with my favourites. Certainly, and definitely the best Pierce Brosnan film. Certainly the best Bond film with him, and of course his best performance. In my opinion, this is so perfect. This film, in my opinion, and just seeing this again, there's different moments in this that just have just kind of surprised me again. Just how wonderful they are, and just how fun this film is. In the different relationships in the film. Of course, Alec Trevelyan, as our main villain, really. You could say Ormov, but I think Sean Bean as Alec Trevelyan, is for me the villain of the film, and yes, he is so great in this film. I think. Once again, this kind of reminded me of, this could be my favourite, Bond villain, actually. I know there's a few that are up there, I think, in performances, in the actual, character, Bond villain, of course, the writing, perhaps, the way, a villain, perhaps, his kind of, his mastermind, his plan, of a particular Bond film, how it goes into play and all this kind of stuff, and how it creates an engaging experience. But I think purely for just enjoyment and just kind of Bond and the villain up against each other, I think this could be the absolute kind of pinnacle of that. Just in my personal opinion, I think Sean Bean is just off the charts amazing in this film. He is so perfect, and I think just the way in which we have this prologue, and we'll get to, of course, yes, the opening of the film. This is stunning. Of course, set in 1986. This film. In its prologue, of course, this Soviet kind of weapons facility, and yes, basically, you have 006 and 007 kind of teaming up. I must say, first of all. There's something about this, I can see why this kind of appealed to me, as a kid as well. These kind of elements, just how kind of, it's kind of this dream kind of way of kind of making, an ally to Bond, just so kind of, so much of a, a close friend to him in that way, and how they're not going to say anything bad to each other, at this point. It's just such a kind of, a particular thing that's done so, kind of maybe campy, over the top, in a particular way. That's just, it's very much, really, really they're sticking to the true friendship, of these characters, and I think that's just so enjoyable to see. They're kind of how they're kind of best buddies in that sense, and I just love this so much. The agents here, the two double O's, of course, teaming up. We see this in the first 5 minutes or so, and then of course Trevelyan is, of course, what we believe. If you've not seen the film before, for him to have been killed, and that's of course the last we see of him until later on in the film, around the midway point really. Just before that we see him return, and we'll get to that. But yes, we have this wonderful opening sequence, and of course Oromov, set up, and a very, very unique character he is, of course, and just such a great character. You could say villain. Then maybe the two villains of the film. Yes, you can kind of regard Oromov and of course Trevelyan as the villains, but really the main villain for me, is Sean Bean's. Of course, Trevelyan. So yes, seeing these characters together, just seeing 006, of course that moment there, and the reaction, of course, from our new Bond, of course, Pierce Brosnan, playing, our new Bond, of course, and he really, for me, is such a great Bond. I think Brosnan, he really perfected it in this first outing, I feel, and I don't think his other performances, really match up to this. There's something about this so raw. It's so kind of at the same time as being raw and kind of more ruthless, I feel, than the other films he starred in. I think it's also more charming. I think he really captured the charm of Bond, the kind of smoothness, of course. There's something about the way he plays this performance in particular, which is very much kind of cheeky, you could say, but not smug, not to the point, the confidence level where you kind of, it's irritating at all. It really is so perfect. I feel personally that it's one of the absolute best kind of Bond performances, and so Bondian. It really, really is, capturing what's kind of so great. I feel can be so great, on a kind of in the different takes, of course, of this character, of this legendary character, right up there with the very best characters in cinema. And this film here, is such a high point in the franchise, and the performances, across the board, are so flawless, whether it be kind of subtle performances, or really, really over the top, or kind of campy performances, but it never goes too far. That's the thing. It's a very, very, kind of out there film. It's a very energetic film. It's a film that's very, very, kind of insane in different moments, but it's never to the point where it goes too far to actually, take away from this, this story perhaps, or this, being a kind of serious film as well at times. It really is a perfect balance, of tone, of style, different elements here. You have, of course, you have this being the first, Bond film to actually use CGI, and this is remarkable. The use of CGI here, I think, is perfect. The blend of practical, of course, as well. The stunt work here is really something else. I think the fistfights in this are some of the best, in cinema history. Actually, I really, especially think the kind of final fist fight, of course, Trevelyan and Bond, is one of the best in cinema. I think there's probably a few that could be better, yes, in the Bond franchise, including, of course, the train, fight scene, from Russia with Love, that's up there as well. But that final kind of fist fight, that kind of showdown between Bond and of course Trevelyan, is really something else. And of course, knowing the stakes, feeling this kind of throughout the entire film, getting that that initial prologue, the planting of seeds, and the difference there, the fact that they were friends, and then of course something consumes Trevelyan. Of course, he is our main villain, as I say, you know, the film, and he's the one who wants to, you know, kind of strike London with this second GoldenEye. Of course, we learn, of course, to kind of offset this and actually, you know, produce a financial, you know, crisis. So again, he's on top. It's very similar to Goldfinger, you could say, in that kind of way. Just very, very different, of course. You know, and this being the first Bond film to kind of feature after the Cold War. Of course, you know, the Cold War ended in '91. You know, the main bulk of the film, you know, in '95, of course, being set after the Cold War. But of course, the prologue, '86. So that's kind of, yeah, it's got the kind of the perfect mix here. You've got that kind of that initial kind of prologue there, which is kind of the Cold War elements. Of course, it does kind of feed through as well and kind of transform, you could say, into different elements and the kind of the atmosphere to this film. You know, something that's so kind of rooted, you know, in particular ways. You know, in the Bond, you know, franchise. It's really, really remarkable, and I think this is definitely a callback in many regards. And I think just in the general sense of being what really makes Bond so special to me. You know, it's these core elements, this blend, this kind of stylistic blend, you know, just a thematic blend of different Bondian, you know, kind of elements, you know, and the fact that they're just Bond films, you know, at their best, I think mix so wonderfully, you know, action, romance, comedy as well. Something that really is definitely, you know, big thing in this film, and of course, adventure, being, you know, adventure films, spy films, of course, ones that you can get caught up in so much, you know, be thrilled by, you know, warm films as well. I feel, you know, at their best. You know, so many of the Bond films just give you this feeling of warmth, you know, the comforting feeling. You know, this film gives me. It really is a special film to me, and I just love how this kind of film is very, very much. You know, it's a very different Bond film. You know, of course, and it's got, you know, a return, you could say, to kind of, you know, after License to Kill. Didn't really have any gadgets, you know, there. You know, you could say a few of the Bond films prior, you know, weren't really focusing on gadgets as much, but then, you know, this film kind of goes all in, you could say, on gadgets, but this film really, really kind of focuses on pivotal ones that kind of, you know, they're set up so wonderfully. I feel, for example, you know, the exploding pen in the first act of the film, and it's kind of this seed, you know, this idea that's implanted in your head. It's so kind of the exploding pen. What a kind of you know, scary and kind of on edge moment, you know, you see in the Q branch. Again, the comedy perfectly blended, you know, there, and of course, but you see this exploding pen, and you see what it can do, and how close a call it can be if something goes wrong with this gadget. Very, very risky gadget, of course, and just the way that this is set up, and then of course you coming into play, you know, in a pivotal moment, you know, in the kind of the final act, just like from Rush of Love did, I think. These films here, for me, you know, the films that contain the best use of a particular gadget, you know, whether that be, you know, in different ways, you know, in the narrative sense, in the way it kind of shows up at the right moment, and you kind of, you remember it. It's not something that you kind of is introduced maybe in the final act, kind of acts as a thing that you kind of, you can kind of see where they were going, but it really didn't make sense, and it wasn't, you know, introduced in a meaningful way, you know, in a way that you kind of, it's kind of at the back of your mind, and then of course you see it again in the final act, and it really, really is so you know, masterfully you know, kind of interwoven into this, and of course, just like from Rush of Love, you know, you have the briefcase, and you have that kind of saving the day, perhaps, or Bond's use of that saving the day, his kind of, you know, his skills, his initiative, of course, using the gadgets to his advantage, and of course, not just there for a gimmicky, you know, in a gimmicky way, but of course, the exploding pen, you know, being one of the, you know, kind of the amazing moments, of course, of the final act. You know, of course, Boris using that, you know, kind of waving that, and then of course Bond hitting out of his hand, and of course, yes, kind of saving them. So, you know, this kind of, once again, Q kind of saves the day, and of course so does Bond in that sense. So yes, I think the gadgets in this film are so wonderfully done. I think just at the same time, it's not too far. It's not too much. Like kind of Die Another Day, where they kind of go so far. You know, the gadgets and the kind of, you know, futuristic kind of elements that it kind of, it just becomes too much, and it kind of becomes a parody perhaps of itself. But you know, this film really you know, has many different gadgets. It has, you know, kind of return to that. I feel definitely one of the more gadget heavy Bonds, but at the same time, it's so controlled and it's so perfectly aligned and kind of placed and kind of subtly built up, and then of course used in such a satisfying way that it's just so epic, this film. And I think just everything about this film, of course, but the opening, of course, being just so stunning, gets you in that pumped state of mind. The thrill of it, of course, and just seeing these two agents, of course, seeing these two agents together, and of course, then that being such a kind of central role, of course, later on in the film, and just such a kind of a brilliant reveal. This is one of the best reveals in cinema. That kind of scene. A bit into the film, of course, after the opening act, well into the kind of past the 45-minute mark, of course, when Alec is finally revealed, that he's alive, of course, and Bond's reaction there appears as so good in this film. His reaction, it just really is so believable, and it's so kind of just epic. It gives me shivers every time, this kind of moment. And of course, the way the staging here, the blocking, the way in which the actors here are aligned, different sides of that statue there, of course, in that kind of scene, at nighttime there. I think that's a real wonderful piece of symbolism. Maybe at times Bond films don't get the kind of attention in that sense, but this is really I feel so well thought out in its imagery, and the way in which Martin Campbell directs this film, and of course the way that these different moments have such a kind of subtle feeling, and at the same time, this film is definitely a film that it's not a subtle film, in many regards, but it has these nuances, these different moments that just kind of are rooted here, and maybe because of the kind of the over the top nature, perhaps, the bombastic kind of feeling it has, and the massive set piece, of course. Some of these little moments here, the kind of small touches, kind of maybe get glossed over, perhaps, but it has got a lot of atmosphere, different ways in which there's kind of symbolism here, and different moments which really they're actually very, very emotional, this film as well. Of course, Natalia, played by Izabella Scorupco, she is one of the finest Bond girls, in my opinion. She is just so perfect in this film, and of course, yes, Natalia, she is, of course, it's got this emotional arc as well. Her kind of the kind of facility there, in Severnaya, it's kind of destroyed, of course, and she believes all of her, every single one of her kind of colleagues to have been, of course, killed. Of course, we know Boris, played by Alan Cumming, so brilliantly in this film. He's a great actor, I feel. He's great in a variety of different films, including Eyes Wide Shut. That's a kind of a mention there. He is so great, and I think in this film, he is just one of the highlights. I feel kind of the henchman, you could say, but not really. You really that's Famke Janssen, who's of course plays on a top, and she is, you kind of you get her introduction pretty early on, and of course soon after that, she really becomes quite a threat for Bond, of course. And yes, many different characters in the film, but I love the comedy. I love the comedy to these villains, to these kind of side villains, perhaps, or henchmen, whatever you want to kind of refer to them as. But I love so much the kind of the way in which they're so enjoyable. It's such a delightful film in its characters, while also being really disturbing, perhaps atmospheric film. And I think that really is definitely true for On a Top. When I was younger, of course. I found many of these different moments with her hilarious, of course. The way in which this is so bizarre, one of the most bizarre characters in a film, but so perfect as well. I think just seeing her kind of techniques, you could say, the different moments, of course, her traits, her character traits. She's of course an insane character, but one that's really hilarious as well, and just so disturbing. It's a scary character, but really a funny character as well. And I think Boris as well, really such a kind of delightful character to have on screen. Of course, Alan Cumming really, really perfecting this role, getting it right down, to a T. This, and I just love the kind of the campy nature as well of all these different characters. So kind of out there, in that sense, but also there's so many different subtleties, to the different characters. Of course, Alec Trevelyan as well. When he falls, he perishes in the end. It's something that of course, in the narrative sense, is really satisfying, but something as well. I do feel sad. I feel this kind of the weight of this whole, the kind of the way in which they were friends, and of course, something of course consumed him. Along the way in between that kind of 86 and 95, that kind of gap there. Something of course consumed him, and he went on this different path. And of course, in the end, you've got these two two characters who were once friends, fellow agents, representing two completely different, set of ideals and, of course, kind of character traits, but there's kind of similarities as well. And of course, just seeing that kind of final act, the way, of course, Alec Trevelyan is defeated, as kind of this, wow, such a kind of, it really is, a Bond villain, kind of. Event there in the end, of course, him falling, and then of course, just getting crushed. It's really something else. Really, they go to town on the way that enemies are kind of dispatched. In this film, I think, but I do feel this kind of the sense of tragedy in that, as well. And I think there are so many different moments in this film. It's just so complex, this one, while also being such a kind of, thrilling, energetic film, and it's such. A masterful film, in terms of direction. And yes, I just feel so many elements in this, so wonderfully achieved. The gun barrel, of course, is one of my favourites. I think actually, Pierce Brosnan, really, for me, kind of was so great. Kind of doing the gun barrel, of course, his walk, his stance, and just the way in which this kind of comes together. These gun barrels here. I'm not, a big fan of the Die Another Day one, but the rest of them are so great. I just think it's really wonderfully achieved, and yes, as I say, his movement, his walk, the kind of the strut, you could say, but not overdone, and it's done in the kind of a smooth way, and it's just so epic as well. The way the blood comes down, it really is. It's quite perfect, and Tomorrow Never Dies as well. So great. World's Not Enough. These three are so great and epic. But yes. Another kind of element, to this film is the kind of the way in which M, as a character, is portrayed, and the way in which they have this unique relationship here. I think, for me, and of course Judi Dench, her first, appearance as M, for me, the best portrayal of M, as a character, and just the relationship, the chemistry here, is first of all perfect, but the relationship, in the film, it really is something quite warm, while also being, someone who, the character of M in this, just like previous entries, of course, kind of, there is this conflict, there is this kind of clash, you could say, this way in which, M treats Bond, but in this film, just after, we have this kind of, maybe bring out different things, kind of character traits of Bond, kind of about his character and the way he treats perhaps other people. Just after that kind of argument, you could say, the conflict there, you get this kind of these subtle moments. I feel where you see that M does have. There is a caring element there. She does care, for Bond, this kind of unique humanity to this film, and I think this kind of sequence in particular, you see M and Bond interacting, that I think is so human, so warm, also being so kind of exciting, in the sense of the conflict, the drama, and the tension there, and I think just really perfected in this film. I think Judi Dench is wonderful, and yes, Pierce Brosnan, so good. I think the thing to note here, is his debut film, of course, as Bond. I think, this really is, getting everything right for me, on this kind of this debut role. I think just the chemistry with every single, other character, new characters, of course, new ones that are just in this film, but also recurring characters. Of course, just the entire cast, an existing cast, and of course, recurring characters played by new actors, for example, Judi Dench. All of these individuals, the chemistry that Piers has with all of them is perfect. I think that really is essential to the kind of the Bond universe, the way it's portrayed in the film, and just how kind of delightful it is. Just so smooth. Does it with ease. But in this film, I don't feel this with the other Brosnan films. I think there is a raw feeling. Kind of a ruthless edge. That Piers has in this film actually. That isn't quite present in the other works. And that's fine. I will get to them. I do have really positive things to say about the next two entries, and I think Piers just really achieved so much across his four films, and I think he was a great Bond. I know not a lot of people would say that, but I've said it before. I think every Bond at least at one point really is great, and I think I love them all. I love all six, the official, of course, Bonds, and I think Piers is really great. I think he is so legendary, and I think just this kind of ruthless, maybe edge, the hard edge he has in this, the coldness, that he brings this trait out of the character, again, in a return, in a callback, just like Dalton was doing, but in a slightly different way, a callback to the roots of Bond, and just trying to bring this character out, also being, this smooth individual, maybe on the surface, and I think that's really one of the core elements, of Bond as an individual, and the humanity in this film really comes through, and I think the relationship with the Bond girl, of course, Natalia, of course, really only come into play around the hour mark. They first meet, and despite that, so wonderful in its romance. It's such a romantic film. It's not, kind of a love story perhaps like Casino Royale, of course, or Her Majesty. But I think in its own unique way, it is kind of this wonderful romance, and I think just the enjoyment levels, of seeing these scenes, of course, in the second half in particular, and of course. The beach scenes, they really are beautiful. They're wonderful. They move me so much, and I just love the way in which this Bond girl is kind of she is a true character. She's given her own motivations, the kind of her own kind of character traits, and I think just as well the chemistry once again works so wonderfully, so perfect, and wonderful performance, of course, by Izabella, and yes, just really wonderfully felt, kind of this is kind of fantastical feeling as well. I love the way the film is shot, in these beach scenes in particular. I think it really is stunning. It really is such a wonderful film, visually, and just the editing as well. It's really, again, a kind of callback to maybe on Her Majesty, the way the cutting is done, and just the fight scenes. I think really something else, and yes, just the kind of the on-edge feeling, and one of the things that is kind of in relation to this is the score by Eric Serra, and the score to this film, I know it's not a popular score, overall. I think there is defenders out there. There is some people, Bond fans that do really love the score, and I'm one of them, of course. But yes, I think generally it gets some kind of criticism, and I think personally for me this is definitely the best score as well of the Brosnan era, and I think just really it's kind of this techno kind of elements in there, kind of, you could say kind of video game-esque in a way, but it fits the film so perfectly, and I think as well, you have these really beautiful moments, the romantic scenes perhaps, and of course I think Bond at the casino, different tracks of the film, Ladies First as well, that the chase, that's used in the chase sequence there, and I think Forever James as well, that's really such a wonderful track. All these different tracks I've mentioned here are just standout moments, moments of just once again watching it, when watching the film and hearing these different elements, these different tracks in the film, it's so perfectly tied to the emotions and to the atmosphere. Just this is so atmospheric, the score, and I think Eric Serra done such a wonderful job. I know he's not someone who returned to score a Bond film. Of course, David Arnold was the main one, who kind of worked on the next or several different Bond films, of course. But yes, I think despite that, I think David Arnold is a great composer, of course, and he worked on so many great scores for the Bond franchise. But I think Eric Serra's score in this film really is one of my favourites, actually, and certainly non John Barry scores. This is right up there. Really great, and just this mix of this kind of on edge, kind of tension within a score, and the beautiful moments, and of course the kind of as well in the film we have the Bond theme kicking in one of the action scenes, of course the tank chase, and of course we have one of the best stunts of all time, in the opening sequence, of course. That is just perfect, and the use of silence there is so perfect, and then we cut to the tank chase, in the kind of middle of the film here. Completely opposite in what it's doing, in the score, of course, in particular, but so stunning. One of the best Bond action sequences for me in the history of the franchise, and the way in which it's so perfectly used, the Bond theme in that sequence, of course, it really is so satisfying, and of course you don't really hear it too much in the rest of the film, and it's kind of all the better for that, kind of to elevate, kind of make this a unique individual experience, of an action scene. It is, still there. It's something I look for in a Bond film, when you kind of have the Bond theme kicking in the action scenes, or just big moments in general. But yes, it is there as well. So you have kind of a mix, a perfect mix, a lovely mix of different elements, that just make Bond score so great. And Eric Serra, yes, once again, such an applause for him, and just the way he scored this, so great. And yes, just the action in general in this film, wow, something else. The way it's edited, I think just before that tank sequence, the kind of moments there when Bond and Natalia kind of getting shot at, perhaps by Oromov, and just that whole moment there when they're running across of the the moments there, and getting shot at, I think it's so kind of epic. It gives me the chills. It's something that just really gets me so pumped up. It's such a kind of wow, Bond fan kind of geeking out moment there. That's just wow. And then of course leading into the tank chase, wow. This is something else, of course, and you could say in many regards some of the best action comes in the final act. Of course, we have on Top's death as well, which is very over the top as well. Very wow, graphic and quite disturbing, actually. It's always a kind of moment that catches me off guard, actually. How she comes back into it there. She's very kind of out of nowhere, perhaps, where she kind of comes down from the chopper, and of course then yes, she kind of gets defeated by Bond in that way, of course. And then of course you have Llewelyn in the final act, who is so great in that, in the bass there, which is one of my favourite kind of final acts in a Bond film, actually. I think one of the absolute best, and just this kind of satisfying way, in which we have this the culmination of so much, and the way in which the narrative wraps up. We get this kind of wonderful, simple ending. I feel, focusing once again on this romance, and just kind of wonderful ending there. And of course, we have an interesting song in the credits. It doesn't really relate to the film, perhaps, but nevertheless, just so kind of it has me smiling. I'm smiling in the credits after what I've witnessed once again, and just to feel the warmth, the kind of the campy nature, but also the atmospheric, serious, disturbing feeling this film has. It really is just one of the most wonderful Bond films, and such a unique blend of so many different Bond elements. And I just love, in general, the plot to this film. Something I don't really usually talk about too much, or it's not something that draws me perhaps as much for different Bond films. But some of the best also have really engrossing plots. I think the way in which Trevelyan is just simply trying to get revenge in its simplest form. It is revenge, and it is of course greed as well, trying to of course financial ruin, the Bank of England, of course, and using this second GoldenEye, its weapon, to kind of attack London and kind of conceal that whole kind of plan financially, of course. But really, it's to get revenge, on Britain for kind of betraying him. He feels betrayed, and this of course. Has clearly consumed him, during the time, of course, that we have this time jump, of course, just the way in which, in the end, this consumes him, and Bond, of course, defeats him, his old friend, his past ally, one of the double O's, of course, an actual agent. I love the way in which this is done. I think just really, really so wonderfully established, the motivations, and you have this mystery to it, to a certain point as well. But you really get these motivations, revealed. These reveals, of course, are so wonderfully placed, in the narrative, that it's just a chain of different reveals. One thing leads to the next, and it's a perfect flow. The editing in general to this film is so great. I think the flow is non-stop, just a perfect blend. It's got this perfect structure to the film, and a blend of character working, exposition, of course, world building, of course, atmosphere and action, and thrills and romance. So yeah, such a wonderful film. I love the plot, as I say, Janice as well. This syndicate, in the way in which this is kind of revealed very, very in very particular ways throughout the film. And I think just to learn that we have the second GoldenEye weapon, it's so genius, the execution of this. And of course, this being the first, really the first Bond film that doesn't actually draw on kind of story elements, from the novels, Fleming novels, or stories. And of course, it does give a nod. The film being called GoldenEye, that of course was Fleming's estate from the 40s. Of course, that's where he wrote, his novels. So yeah, it's just a kind of great. It's its own thing. It's also giving nods. It's giving tributes, of course, and it is, as I say, it's going back to formula, back to the core elements, really, of what makes Bond so great, but also being kind of a very, very different take on Bond. It's this kind of as well gadget heavy film, but it doesn't feel overbearing. It never feels too much, and of course the gadgets that are there are so wonderfully introduced. They're so, the storytelling is just so wonderful, that I'm so invested in the gadget, and it feels like an actual it has a role in the human sense as well, in the way of the characters, and the way, of course, that it plays, the exploding pen perhaps, the laser watch as well, great stuff. I feel they went too far with that in a particular entry, in particular, but we'll get to that. We'll talk about GoldenEye, of course. This, is just perfectly done. It's not too much, but it's enough to kind of get me pumped, get me kind of, really just it's cool stuff. But it's more than that, of course. It's really used so wonderfully, and yes, just see, all these different moments of action, of course, just so great. And of course, you've got these new characters being introduced, while also the recurring characters being so great. Q once again, and of course a different M this time round. And for me, Judi Dench is the best M, of the series, and it's just so great in this film. I love the kind of way in which she's introduced, and it's also sincere, this film as well. It's also well-meaning in its intention. I think it's just a wonderful film, so warm, so charming. This film, the comedy works perfectly. It's a real perfect balance of comedy, of course, and the different one-liners. And just for England, this line that kind of crops up so many different times in the film. This recurring interaction between Alec and Bond, of course, and him saying for England, James, and then of course in the end, of course, Bond saying for me, and then that is when the Bond villain perishes, and we have it. Such an epic moment. Again, bringing different kind of points in the film that are set up perhaps, or recurring elements, and kind of culminating, or kind of ringing true, finalising these different moments, of course, these individual points in the final act. So you've got a kind of a culmination of so many different moments that are so wonderfully brought together in the end. There's just a mix of so much satisfaction, so much thrills, of course, and this underlying tragedy, or this kind of emotion to the film, and just the way in which we see Natalia as well. Her kind of the devastation as well, of her character and what happens to her, and of course this is the stress, that kind of happens as well, and then of course, the way in which she kind of is such a strong character, and on her own, and then of course she meets Bond, and they have this wonderful romance as well. It's kind of this wonderful mix. It's got everything. This film, it's one of those Bond films for me that has everything working perfectly, and I think this really is one of the absolute best Bond films, and one of the absolute best action films ever made, in my opinion, and therefore, of course, one of my absolute favourite films of all time in the history of cinema. This really is a supreme masterpiece of cinema. I know, of course, not everyone loves the film, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. We all have different opinions, different rankings, of course. But for me, this has always been one of my favourites. Of course, I did say it was at one point my favourite before I saw a few Bond films, but it is certainly up there, and I think it's one of the ultimate Bond films. It really represents so much. What's so great about Bond? You could say it's the ultimate Bondian film in many regards, and I wouldn't really disagree in that sense. But yeah, I think this really just hits every moment, every story beat right. So wonderfully, of course, the action, the editing. It's really quite thrilling, as well as really really beautiful, sophisticated. The style of the film, the way in which the characters are introduced on the top, of course. It's all these different stylistic choices. It feels smooth. It feels elegant. It also feels raw and kind of visceral, and it feels on edge. Of course, the score plays a hand in that, but it really is such a poetic script, I feel, and the way in which these different characters are brought out, and all their motivations, the themes of the film as well, so wonderfully explored. It's an action film with so much going on in this one, I feel, and of course, it is kind of this campy, bombastic film as well, so it has so much that just pleases me, while also being such an investing film. So much to think about, so much to kind of feel, after watching, of course, in the credits, it hits you the kind of just the pleasing feeling, but it has that underlying kind of these different moments, the elements, of course, to the story, and of course these moments that are just so sad and emotional. Really something else, this, but just the enjoyability factor of Boris as well, Robbie Coltrane as well, so great in this film, and of course he's in The World Is Not Enough. We'll get to that, but he is great, as well, and just Urmov as well, so great in this film. I think just you have a perfect balance here of so many great characters, villains, henchmen, other different characters, the Bond girl as well, Natalia, so perfect, one of the best. You have such a great, a masterful, legendary Bond performance by Piers, and just seeing all the elements that I love as well. Q Branch perhaps, Desmond, Llewelyn, so great once again as always. Just to see M as well, and the kind of the emotional moments there, the humanity, and of course there's a scene on the beach as well that's very unique, and it could be analysed, of course. Here now, I won't do that, but let's just say that moment, of course, when Natalia, is kind of talking with Bond, just kind of contemplating on the Bond character, as a human, and as how can he act this way, in this cold manner, and it's not something that's fully delved into. It's not back and forth really, and I think that's perfectly done. It's not too much. We don't learn. We don't dig in too much there. It's not kind of intrusive, but it is such a moment to kind of leave me wondering, and also get enough of the kind of there's subtle looks there. There are moments there that just really are so wonderful as well, and Bond as a human. This film really portrays this so wonderfully, and yes, just as an action film, as such a thrilling piece of cinema, as a comedy, action as an adventure, it's really kind of this is perfect kind of romance, adventure, action, atmospheric thriller, of course. It's so wonderful, this film, and of course, yes, one of my absolute favourite Bond films of all time. Just everyone in the film playing their role so perfectly. Of course, Jodon Baker who's also in The Living Daylights, is in this film, and he plays, of course, a completely different character, Wade, of course, and he is great in this film. Adds so much kind of comedy, the camaraderie, of course, between him and Bond, and just the way he is used in the film is just right as well, and just such a kind of array of different characters, such memorable characters, colourful characters, of course, ones that are so charming in their own way, and of course just the way the film is shot, as I say, just brings back some moments, in the kind of beach scenes, later on in the film. So wonderful. The kind of colour tone, the different tones to this film, the kind of the cool blues, early on, perhaps, and then of course contrasting with the wonderful, warm colour tones later on in the film, and just the way in which this film is shot is so dreamlike. It's so kind of fantastical and kind of dreamy. That really just is such a wonderful film. It's so pleasing to look at and just to feel. This experience. Just adds to it. The way in which the film was shot. And just all of these different characters, as I say, the motivations, of Alec, of course, and the chemistry, the relationship between, these two characters, him and Bond, throughout the film. He is the main, kind of villain, although, of course, Orumov, played by, of course, Gottfried John, but he is kind of the villain, but you could say that Sean Bean, for me, is the kind of, the standout, kind of villain of the film, and he's the one that, of course, is originally the friend, the kind of fellow agent of Bond, and it's so kind of wonderful in the way it's done, and I love as I say, the kind of the way in which it's so charming. It's so kind of done in a particular way, maybe a campy way early on, that I love so much. In how they're so they're best buddies, as I've said, and just the way the lines, of course, for England, these recurring elements, in this film that make it so kind of satisfying, so complete as an experience, as a Bond film, as an action film, and as a a narrative, as a story, a tale, and it really is just mythic in places. It really is, and I think just as well, an on edge kind of unique, bizarre experience as well. The kind of score as well by Eric Serra. The techno elements of the score and the beauty of the score, just how epic it is. This film is all of those and more. It really is just such a wonderful film. It really is a stunning Bond film. It's an epic film, in my opinion. It's such a perfect blend for me of just what makes Bond so great, and what makes it my favourite franchise, of course, in cinema. This is one of the very best, one of the high points. Coming after License to Kill, which again is a stunning film in my opinion. So a real, quite a streak here actually of just a high point actually once again consistently for Bond, and I really love this film in particular. It really is such a stunning film. Piers really perfects the role. It's kind of this vulnerable feeling you have, the cold feeling you have of it. It's this ruthless, it's this charm, it's just everything, perfect blend of such, an array of traits, and kind of, yes, just elements to this character, to this individual, to this, entertainment, this piece of entertainment. Bond as a character is a human, of course, but he's also, a kind of, a symbol as well, and I think just a wonderful way in which Martin Campbell brings this entire, kind of fleshing, out of this character, while also not going, heavy on that in particular ways, maybe like Casino Royale does, in the way it kind of reveals different, kind of character traits, reasoning perhaps behind things. But I think, this film really, for what this film is, it really just exceeds, every element. It's just a mind-blowing action adventure. It's kind of wonderful, kind of romance film. It's a wonderful atmospheric, unique thriller. And it's got these different gadgets, of course, that are used so wonderfully. This film, it's got charm. It's got kind of a real kind of cool element, to it. But of course, it is this very raw, gritty film as well. And I think Martin Campbell is a genius. He really has directed two of some of the the best Bond films. This and Casino Royale, very very different, but in many regards kind of similar. But kind of just both standing out as some of the best Bond films. So yes, from the opening sequence, which is just so pleasing, so charming, as I say, so thrilling, wonderful stuff. The title sequence, which is just so stunning. Of course, Tina Turner, as we know, performing this, and yes, all the way through. The score, Eric Serra, providing such a great, maybe underappreciated score. Really the standout score, I feel. But yes, all the way through, you have the action, the perfect action, the way it's edited. The way in which we have the perfect placement, of different action set pieces that in many regards kind of top themselves as we go through the film. But we have these reveals, we have these characters that are so well written, so perfectly cast, performed by these legendary individuals. Of course, Sean Bean is one of my favourite modern actors, and I think he's just perfect as the villain here. Alec Trevelyan, it's just such a pitch perfect portrayal here, and I could say, as I've been saying, I could say this is my favourite villain of the franchise. I won't reveal definitely yet because that's for later kind of discussions. But in terms of the relationship between the hero and the villain, this is such a delight, such a a kind of a rare treat, and it's just something that really is a dream Bond film. It's kind of this childlike way in which the characters maybe act, or introduced, but the subtleties as well. I think Martin Campbell balances this all out so wonderfully, so perfectly. It's got this real unique blend, and I just think it's such a stunning film. The comedy, of course, is such a hilarious film. So many one-liners, of course, but just moments, that are just so hilarious with Boris, as well. I'm Invincible, it's such, a memorable film, from the opening all the way to the ending. Yes, it's just such a legendary film, and when those credits go, of course, when those credits roll, I am just blown away. I am just kind of uplifted. It's such a lovely film. This such a lovely creation, just like Bond is. Such a well-meaning, kind of humble, but just really just thrilling, just lovely franchise. I feel it's such a beautiful creation, and it's given so much joy to many people, of course. Me included, from a young age, and this film is just such a kind of nostalgic film, but it is really a film that's in so many regards as well, just very very disturbing film, very atmospheric, and it's a film that I've loved my entire life. As long as I can remember, I've watched this film so many times, and I've always loved this film. I think it's just an absolute masterpiece, and it really is one of the finest action films for me ever made. And it's just really, as I've been saying, it kind of combines so much that makes Bond so great, and more. So yes, my final rating for this film is an overwhelmingly positive one. It really is a film that means so much to me. Of course, it isn't quite on the level of the tier S rating that I give to certain films. Of course, that is my absolute highest rating. It's kind of essentially a bonus tier I give to very few films, ones that just go to the extra level, of kind of emotion, of what a film means to me, and that can be, of course, a variety of films. But I have to say, even if a film gets into my maybe the lower portions of the tier S rating, it has to slightly, in moments, resemble the levels of the maybe top 20 or so members of the tier S rating. So with that criteria and that way of thinking, reasoning, there, I think this is very very close. You could say it's an extremely high contender for getting in there, but it isn't quite in the tier S. I think I've concluded that the tier S needs to mean something there's just a little bit more from this film for emotion, for spiritual levels, etc. You know, just in terms of how much I care for, how much it means to me, a particular film. And of course, Bond means so much to me. And of course, I have already given a particular Bond film on Media Reviews a tier S. But you know, this one at least is a very, very high tier 1. This is an absolute masterpiece, and I think just it is very, very close, you could say, but it isn't quite there, you know, with the tier S kind of rating, and I stand by that. And I think yes, that's the way in which I've thought about it. You know, it isn't quite there, of course, but it means so much to me, and that's why I kind of want to get across that it isn't. It may not be my absolute, you know, highest, you know, the bonus tier perhaps, but it is one of my top 100 films. Absolutely, it's one of my favourite action films. One of my favourite films, you know, of all time, of course, and I love it so much. I love every single second of this film. The Eric Serra score is so unique and wonderful, and on edge, and just so great. You know, so unique. The style to this film, and just the characters, the emotions to this, and the blend of so much, you know, kind of elements of Bond, but something very, very unique and different as well. It's such a wonderful film. You know, this is all my opinion, of course, but yes, there are maybe it's not, you know, it's not quite my favourite Bond film, of course, as you may already know, but you know, it's certainly up there. I must say, you know, on a personal level, you know, I absolutely love this film. I think it's one of the most satisfying Bond films. It has, you know, all the elements working at the highest order, really, you know, in every regard. I think just a masterful Bond film. Of course, Pierce Brosnan giving the best performance that he gave, you know, as Bond. I think he was great. I'm a big defender of, you know, Pierce overall. Absolutely, he was great. And I think, you know, as I've said, I love all the Bonds. At some moment at least, they've given, you know, a great, you know, performance, one that he really, you know, represents what they were trying to do, you know, and I take as Bond. I think all 6 of them, you know, are great. You know, I love them all. You know, I think they're all great. But you know, this one in particular is you know, is the best Pierce, you know, Bond performance. So yes, just absolutely stunning. You know, really wonderful film in my opinion. I love everything about it. I love the plot, the action, the different acts, the way they kind of flow. You know, of course, Alex Llewelyn is one of the most enjoyable villains in the history of cinema, and yes, this film does have a lot of emotion in it. As I say, I have to say it doesn't quite get into the tier S rating because of certain particular emotional, spiritual levels that them films just need to do. You know, slightly, as I said, resemble in maybe a few areas, just at least. You know, kind of resemble the upper, you know, kind of top 20 or so, or 30 of my favourite, you know, films in the tier S rating. And this film doesn't quite do that, but again, I can't stress enough how much I love this film. It's an energetic, you know, bombastic, satisfying piece of cinema that is just such a delight, such a treat to experience. You know, I am so invested in this film. The motivations, of course, all the different interesting themes, the layers of this film. You know, it really is something else. Natalia, you know, is such a great character. Boris, of course, on the top. All these great characters, so enjoyable. You know, such a kind of entertaining film. So energetic, but it's so perfectly controlled by the legendary Martin Campbell. I think it's absolutely masterful, and that's my opinion. What is your opinion? This will be great to know, and yes, let's discuss Bond as we always do. You know, I love this film. I love the gun barrel. I love all these different elements. They are so perfect. Pierce is perfect. Of course, Izabella Scorupco is perfect. You know, Sean Bean. They're all you know, at the top of their games. Really, I think just so good. You know, just legendary individuals all coming together for this special Bond film. You know, I feel so. It'd be great to know what you think. What do you think of this film? What do you think of the Pierce Brosnan films? You know, what's your favourite perhaps? We all have different rankings, of course, and always great to discuss Bond. You know, it really is my favourite franchise personally, and yes, I absolutely love this film. It is really such a kind of a special achievement, I feel, and I can't get enough of this film. I want to watch this on loop like I did as a kid. You know, it's just such a wonderful film, so enjoyable, so epic epic film. This is epic. What a wonderful film this is. You know, the action, the adventure, the romance, the beautiful Izabella Scorupco. You know, this is such a wonderful film. The editing, cinematography, just, you know, the plot and the way it's so invested in itself, and the kind of the style to the film. You know, it has it all. It has it all. You know, I feel, and yes, it'd be great to discuss this film. I really look forward to discussing this film and the next Pierce Brosnan films. Casino Royale as well, we'll get to that, and the films there. So yes, we have a few left. You know, we haven't got loads left in that sense this time around, but you know, it's something, you know, we still have a few at least to discuss. So I look forward to that, and yes, going through the remainder of these films on this, and moving on to the final kind of part of you know, the set behind me. So I can't wait to do that, and of course talk with you viewers as always. So yes, as always, take care, and yes, thanks for watching.